pick your class and
earn your battle points.
Because it's time for the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. Welcome to episode 195 of the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, joined by
Mandalorian Business, modder in Star Wars Battlefront 2, and 3D artist outside Battlefront 2.
I'm DULANA57, and I mostly do effects and sometimes cosmetic mods, mostly effects and sometimes UI.
I'm Cade. I am a developer for Frosty, the modding tools for Battlefront 2. And I am also a game designer and graphic artist. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the modding community, getting some of the details of what it takes to get a mod going and how the community works in the modding world. Let's get started. What are you guys' experience with Star Wars and Star Wars Battlefront? What got you into the games? Yeah, so I have always loved Star Wars, even as a kid. I think I first actually started getting into Star Wars by watching The Phantom Menace Episode 1, which, it's an interesting introduction to Star Wars, but I still loved it as a kid. And I have always loved Star Wars since. So I started playing Star Wars Battlefront 2005 first, and I really enjoyed that. Then Battlefront 2015 was announced, and I was really excited for it. So on release, I played it a bit. I lost a bit of interest, and I wasn't too into Star Wars at that time. But then I started getting back into the game around the Battle of Scarif update, the last expansion. And I did really enjoy that. So around that time, I was also working learning about game design, specifically using the game engine Unreal Engine 4. And since I was getting more into Star Wars, I wanted to see if it was possible for me to, make a Star Wars-based game. So I learned about a software called Frosty, which lets me export the art and the characters and models and weapons from the game. So I originally was just taking art just for testing with my own work. And then I originally was like, when I was playing Battlefront 2015, I was thinking, I wish I could spawn more than just one ATST. So I figured out that Frosty allows you to do that. And one of my first modifications I made to Battlefront 2015 was I spawned, I think, 20 ATSTs.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's my introduction to Frosty, and since then, I was very excited for Battlefront 2017 or Battlefront 2's announcement. I participated in the closed alpha, the beta, and launch, and have been playing it since. I later joined the Frosty team and started working on Frosty as well, and have just been modding the game since.
Okay, where should I start? I never really played games much as a kid, because my parents didn't let me. So I didn't really get to play the 2005 Battlefront and stuff like that, really. And I mostly got into Star Wars a little bit later than I would have liked to. Maybe preteen or something. And I've always liked Star Wars since I started. And Star Wars Battlefront 2015 was my first real shooter type of game. And I enjoyed the heck out of it. I played it constantly throughout its lifespan. And I was friends with Cade at the time because of our Minecraft animator whatever history. And he showed me that modding was possible for 2015. So I joined the modding server as a consumer or whatever from him. And then later on, I wanted to make my own mods, and I started off doing a balancing single player mod for Skirmish or whatever in 2015 for the 2015 game, and that was really my beginning in modding. While nowadays and then when 2017 came out, I did the Better Sabers mod, which is my most popular mod by far, And it was really cool because I got to. It was more of an art based, like it was more a visual mod than me having to learn how logic or whatever that stuff started to work, because that wasn't really my strong suit. I knew what I wanted stuff to look like, and I made it look like that. And that was my drive, I guess you can say. And nowadays, I mostly do FX mods where I have learned a lot more about maybe like logic and stuff, and like the more intricate parts of modding. And I've been able to do more with my FX modding.
That's awesome.
As for me, my story with modding, or for Star Wars, for that matter, started when I actually had my first laptop ever. And I was able to play Battlefront 2005 for the first time. That was actually my introduction in the world of gaming, but all and in the Star Wars gaming. And I was really interested in mods. I was installing mods like crazy. I was having like 100 mods installed at once. Luckily, they weren't conflicting each other. And later on, later when I was like 14 years old, I think, I got my very first PC. I was constantly looking at trailers for Battlefront 2015. I wasn't really aware of what the gaming world is at that time, but I was aware of Battlefront 2015 being there and it's being awesome. And I was like, wait, that's actually animation. It looks so real. And later that year, I think in 2016, before Christmas, I think, I got my first gaming PC ever. And the first game I bought was Battlefront 2015. And I started to play. I was basically a noob. I didn't know anything too much about, shooting and stuff, because it was way different than 2005 Battlefront. And afterwards, when the modding part came in, and everyone was like, wait, Frosty engine is actually moddable. I got interested in that. I wasn't a modder for Battlefront 2015 at all, but I know I played with mods. I enjoy them so much, and that's how I got excited for 2017 Battlefront, because I am such a big Clone Wars fan. I have been growing with Clone Wars and with love for those characters, Ahsoka, Anakin, especially Clone Troopers. And I was excited to see that finally I can play with the Clone Troopers. I wanted to play in modern graphics since, I started to get into Battlefront with 2005. And the funny thing that actually got me into modding was when Battlefront 2 arrived. Later on, I think in November to December, Frosty editor for Battlefront 2017 was released. And modding was starting to roll. Mods were starting to roll. I was a little annoyed because there weren't too many Clone Trooper mods. Like, let's say Clone Trooper mods like Fives or Echo or characters that can be brought into the game. And I got annoyed and I told myself, okay, you know what? I'm gonna do it myself. I got a cracked version of Photoshop. I followed some tutorials, and I got my first texture mods in, even though they were very bad, like under any critique. The markings, the one marking of Dogma, let's say, was all over the classes. That's one thing. And but it didn't matter. People loved it, and I also was proud of myself that, hey, look, I'm actually getting something that is also making other people proud, not proud, happy. And then I continued doing that. I got advice from other modders, and I'm really thankful for that, because that's what got me to go forward. And later on, I started to evolve in modding, learning from different people, different tutorials, and such. And then at some point, because I opened my Instagram page, I said, okay, let's do Battlefront photography, and it got pretty well. It's like it grew up pretty quick. My Instagram page, and later on I started the finals of the 501st. It was at first, but then it got popular by the name of the finals of Legions Parole, because I was doing a Legion almost every week. I was ignoring school only for modding. And that really got people excited, and I continued to do that stuff. That way, I also got into 3D art per all, doing modeling, doing rendering and such, because I was also restrained by the cinematic tools being not available anymore, because the developer got to DICE, and I told myself I cannot just leave the quality to camera Ansel, to NVIDIA Ansel, the default camera from in-game. I told myself I gotta go forward. Then I started to get into more 3D art stuff, and I continuously did and tried to improve my content. And so are we today. And that's my story.
Yeah. I'd like to quickly just touch on one thing that was mentioned and expand on that. So, Frosty was first released first updated to support Battlefront 2017 in December. So specifically on Christmas Day, that's when the update was released and people were able to start making mods. So I am an admin on the Battlefront modding Discord server, and I was at the time a developer for Frosty, but the lead developer, Galaxy Man 2015, he only gave me a heads up that he was going to be releasing the update that added support for Battlefront 2 on Christmas Day about 2 hours in advance. And wow. I had a vacation planned that day. So on Christmas Day in the morning, I was going to be on a 14-hour car trip. So I wake up to see Frosty was released and it was updated and everyone was getting all excited. And that was the most influx of users joining the Discord server I've ever seen. And I didn't have my computer with me. I was, in a 14-hour car trip, and I just had my phone, and I remember we had to create multiple troubleshooting chats from how many people were trying to message and get help and trying to figure stuff out. It was crazy. Yeah, it was so crazy.
I actually remember that day.
Me too.
Now I remember that you have actually told me. I actually remember there were so many people excited, and I remember there was that first mod, the Pink Vader, if you know what I remember. That was a response to those statements before from Reddit, and overall, it was those were some crazy days.
Yeah, I made sure for that to be the first mod to ever release for Star Wars Battlefront 2, as I released the Pink Vader mod.
GG on that. You touched a nerve there, I'm sure.
It's so cool how all of these things come together. So what drove all of you to see, okay, there's Battlefront, here's this mod platform, I'm going to use that and make something for Battlefront. What drew you guys to doing stuff like that? Let's start with Cade.
So I have always been interested in game development. So as I touched on briefly before, I was using Unreal Engine 4 to continue my passion for making video games. So I was doing that for 3 or 4 years prior to Battlefront 2015. And I have always been interested in the game design aspect of it. So, I made a multiplayer game where people could run around and shoot. And then I added, vehicles, which that's why I first got Frosty, was to export, the AAT for the vehicle. And I exported the model for the B1 battle droids so I could have them as my characters. So when I first started modding Frosty, I was very interested in how the actual code and the logic worked for the game, how DICE made the game how it is. So the first, few mods I made, for example, for Battlefront 2, as I was learning, I made a very simple mod that changed it. So when Palpatine rolls or like dashes, it will play his screaming sound 100% of the time. So it started simple with that, and then I slowly moved and realized that I was more interested in the UI, or the like graphic design aspect. So another mod I released later was called Colored Ranks, and that changed the actual like level icons and matched them with certain colors. So there's like a common, rare, epic, and then legendary. So it was easier to see like, you know, who is what level by color. I also assisted a friend of mine, Dur Wangular, on the No Holograms mod, and that was just because we both had a very strong distaste for the holograms, and so I assisted him with removing them.
I remember that mod coming out, and that was such a really fun thing to see. It changed how the game looked. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of the holograms either, and so when I saw that, I was like, oh man, that looks so nice.
Yeah, so I have also worked on a few other mods, some of which include the squad list, and that I made that mod when the squad system first came out. So DICE has since added their own little squad list, so like right next to the radar you can see the status of your teammates and who's in your squad. That originally was not a thing, so I added that completely from scratch, and DICE later added it themselves, which I was very happy with. I have also since been working on a mod called Instant Action Improvements, which is mainly being worked on by Mophead, but then there's also a few other people such as DULANA who's also working on it. And my work has yet to be announced, but it is going to be making a lot of changes to instant action for people to have a lot of new ways to play the game.
So I started modding like right after a while after Cade brought me in, because I started off as just primarily a guy who downloaded mods. But I saw Danger Cat's Sago mod, which changed some of the gunplay and the AI for 2015 Skirmish. And I didn't agree with some of his weapon design choices, so I decided I wanted to do my own changes, which is, and my first mod, I'm pretty sure, was the revamped Blasters pack for 2015, which changed random, like, various aspects of a weapon to match how I wanted them to be. And I knew I wanted to mod Battlefront 2017 when that came out, but I wasn't sure what until I played the game, and I really, really disliked how the sabers looked. As soon as Frosty was released on Christmas Day, I started working on better sabers, which removed the awful saber flare, lens flare, whatever on the sabers, and changed some of the colors and thickness to match what they should be, in my opinion. And then later on, I started getting more into other aspects of modding. I did some UI mods such as Better UI, which I later handed over to, or shared development with Cade, and then the mod ended up dying. And then when Mesh Import came out, since I had like 7 to 8 years on and off experience with Blender, I knew I wanted to try and mesh import some stuff, and I mesh imported a bunch of meme mods in the beginning, like the Minecraft weapons, the Minecraft characters, etc. And I opened a Patreon like a little bit later on into that, where I did some mod requests and posted my stuff in like alpha testing Patreon roles or whatever. And nowadays I mostly don't do much with my Patreon anymore, sadly, because I'm mostly working on mods or things for instant action improvements.
Yeah.
Like, have you guys seen the Magna Guard effects for the staff?
Yeah, totally. You did a great job with them, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I stayed awake until 9 a.m. in the 9 in the morning, trying to figure out how to get that looking as good as possible. And it was frustrating, but also really interesting learning how DICE does effects and how I can use that to do what I want to do.
That's awesome.
It really paid off.
Yeah.
Mando, when you got to Battlefront, you started playing the game. I love these stories of like I saw this thing and I didn't like it, so I changed it. What were some of your experiences doing something like that?
Well, at first, I wasn't really doing too many changes to the textures because I was always interested in the artistic part of the game, like texturing, materials, and stuff, things like this. I wasn't doing too much because I didn't have the experience. However, what motivated me the most was the love for Clone Wars, actually. And I saw that other people really loved this stuff. That's why I opened up an Instagram later on so I can share all of what I'm doing. But later on, I realized that there's something really off with the clone troopers in Battlefront. Like, they weren't too similar to the movies at the beginning. They were really shiny, and there wasn't too much roughness to it. The armor wasn't too rough in many ways. That's one aspect. And then I inspired myself from other modders like OrthoHex, which he brought weathering effect first. He was the first one to actually bring weathering effects on the clone troopers. I was like, wait, that's what's missing. I should start and improve on that also. Thanks to him. And then later on, I was constantly looking at the movies. I took the movies as a reference. I didn't have any idea on how to do textures and materials in Substance Painter, a program especially designed for texturing and giving 3D models materials. I wasn't familiar with Substance Painter at that time, and I was doing all of my work in Photoshop, which was really a pain because doing textures from actual 3D models into Photoshop is really a pain, and
Yeah, it's not really
work.
designed for that.
It's not designed at all. Trust me. I got way too used to it at some point, and I didn't realize how much time I was wasting. And later on, I met another good friend of mine, another 3D artist called Eric M1999. He introduced me to Substance Painter. He also helped me helped me get into other aspects of texturing and doing the artistic part for Battlefront 2. He's not really a modder, but he knows 3D art overall. And that's what actually motivated me to go forward. I was like, yes, another way to improve my content, to improve the mods that I do. And I continued doing that with a thought in mind that people are actually waiting for this stuff. Like, for example, the Finals of the 501st, that mod had like 5 different versions. Like, I personally, I love the 501st, and so do other people. And that's what made me go forward and improve it more and more. And that also came with the updates that were for Battlefront 2. Because in the beginning, I wasn't able to do multiple appearances in the mod because I didn't have too many options. I had like 1 or 2, 3 skins per class that were very similar, or sometimes they were duplicated. And only later on, I managed to do the stuff that I wanted from the beginning, like bring as many characters as possible from a certain legion, in this case the 501st, into one mod, and have people be immersed into the experience of playing with only one legion. Like, let's take the Siege of Mandalore for an example. Like, there was only the 501st and the 332nd, which is basically the 501st but under another name. And that's what I wanted people to experience. Have an entire legion do a battle, a kind of a solo battalion battle, if you know what I'm saying, with the enemy. And people really enjoyed it, and I said, okay, let's do other legions also. And that's how the finest of the legions per all got popular among fans of Battlefront 2.
That's awesome. So going into kind of like the process, you play Battlefront, you find something, you're like, man, this is super annoying. I wish this was different. From there, where do you go?
I can explain. So it really depends on what I specifically dislike or where I want to, like, what exactly I want to change. So I guess I'll, for example, take the instant action improvements. So that is a mod I've been working on with Mophead specifically, and he and I have been working on kind of pushing the limits of what modding can achieve for the game. So one very big issue while DICE was still updating the game was almost every mod, not always, but the majority of mods would break when DICE updated the game.
Yeah.
So, let's say I put hours and hours into this one mod. I know that every single month it's going to break and I'm going to have to remake it. And that was, I lost a lot of motivation because of that, because I knew all my hard work was going to go to waste almost every single month. So as sad as it was to hear, DICE has moved on and their vision for Battlefront 2 is complete. So they've stopped updating the game. That was really sad to hear, but it means that, mods can be...
My mod won't break.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it was a bit exciting for me and Mophead as well. So we have been able to get a lot of work done without, the being scared of it breaking all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've been focusing on is we have since for instant action improvements, we're planning on adding 4 new reinforcements, 2 new heroes, which is Ahsoka Tano and the Magna Guard, and then four reinforcements that are completely new to the game. They don't replace anything else. So as DULANA mentioned, he worked on the effects for the Magna Guard, and it's going very well so far. So my process when working on these things, so for example, I am currently working on instant action improvements, specifically the logic and coding side of things. So I usually will plan out exactly what I want to do. So I think, okay, instant action has its limitations. What do I want to change about it? So I'll sometimes, do a Google Doc or sometimes brainstorm in my head and kind of plan out what exactly I want to change about it or modify or add. And I usually, in this case, I'll discuss with Mophead saying, hey, I want to change this part, or I maybe want to add a new menu or something like that. And he'll give his feedback, because I think it's really important to get feedback from other people. And once I do that, I'll usually, if it's like a visual change, so let's say I was adding a new menu to the game, I'll open Adobe Illustrator and create like kind of a rough concept of what it will look like. Then I will go into Frosty and try replicating the concept I made. And after that, I'll just kind of tinker with it and get it until it looks how I want to. And that process is what takes the longest. The actual modding section where I utilize Frosty and, put what I envisioned into the game itself. So yeah.
For people who don't know, what is Frosty?
Oh yeah. Frosty is the modding tool that is used for to make modifications to the game. So, let's say I wanted to add a new Clone Legion or change the Clone Legion or the colors for it. Or, give Luke Skywalker a jetpack. You use Frosty, which is like a software you can get on your computer, to either download modifications or make them. So I use the Frosty editor to make my modifications.
My viewpoint, I have not been super in-depth into the mod community. One, because I just got my PC a month or 2 ago. Mm-hmm. So I've been a console player. But I have looked upon the community of modding with loving eyes, I guess I would say. Really, really cool what everyone's doing with the game. And it's, like you said, it's very sad that Battlefront ended support. But on the flip side, the modding community is in a place that is very, very well put for something like this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the links that modding went to in 2015 was very visual customization kind of thing. At least most of the mods that got popular were the visual changes, stuff for the skins. It wasn't really like ground level stuff like you're doing with arcade and instant action. What changed between those two things?
I think the biggest changes were the Frosty editor has updated to make modifying the actual gameplay itself. It's been made easier. But Frosty, the actual editor itself, or the program, it was released for the first time around 2015. So people were kind of still figuring things out, learning all the processes for doing things, and it is since evolved and grown, and some people's interests have moved more into the technical side, or modifying the gameplay. And that started with one DULANA changing all the blasters to have different damage values, or how fast they shoot and such. So it's slowly gone up, the more interest and the people who are interested in making these gameplay mods.
I could still argue that cosmetic mods are still usually the most popular mods still to this day.
Oh, definitely.
It's like the big the big technical mods do get in front of them, but just when someone new tries to do like a UI or graphic mod, they really don't get as much coverage, I guess you could say, as a cosmetic mod would.
Yeah, and that can be a bit frustrating at times, that this one mod that just imports Woody from Toy Story gets more upvotes than instant action improvements. But
I'm still mad that my shovelware mods have done a lot better than my serious mods, because my serious mods take way more effort than my meme shovelware mods.
Yeah, it can be, I guess, frustrating, but it's just usually the community is more interested in the cosmetic and visual mods.
Well, it's also a much easier thing to digest. So say you changed the entire gameplay format of heroes versus villains. You have to play that, and then visually you're like, oh my gosh, it's Woody. Wow.
Yeah.
So I definitely see where you're coming from. It's interesting to see how the modding community, like you're saying, they make a specific thing just for upvotes, and then you pour your blood, sweat, and tears into this new thing. But I do think they complement each other in an interesting way. I am incredibly impressed with the amount of work that you guys put into something like this, the amount of work that you're putting into the instant action changes. That is crazy to think about, that you're adding 2 new heroes, 4 new reinforcements that weren't in the game. Instead of a visual revamp, you're creating something that wasn't there in Battlefront. That is an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully instant action improvements does get more coverage in that regard, because compared to just we're just changing the blaster damage or something, just gameplay, we're also adding Ahsoka to the game, which is also very visual and cosmetic, which is much more appealing to people. And it's much easier to showcase and have hype for things you can actually see, cosmetic changes. So being able to showcase and announce Ahsoka was really cool to see everyone's reactions to it, because I think everyone did everyone on the team did a good
Ahsoka
job.
win.
Yeah.
On a side note about Ahsoka, I remember seeing the Ahsoka model in cinematic captures Unreal Engine team, and I was like, okay, that is the ultimate Ahsoka model, next to realism. I mean, you can tell that she's actually Ahsoka, but in a realistic form. But you don't you don't you don't confuse her with someone else. I was really thinking, will that be in Battlefront? And a few days later, I see Cade or whoever posted it. It's like Ahsoka is coming to Arcade Pros. I was so happy. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
So what got you guys started on this path? Like, okay, we're gonna push the limits of what modding is, and this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah, so I've always been very interested in the gameplay and logic aspect, and I saw Moped was working on instant action improvements, and I was really interested in it because people usually don't work on the like you said, majority of people do cosmetic mods, and that is very impressive. I am not an artist, to say the least. The best I can do is draw stick figures. So, it was really cool being able to see that Moped was working on adding the reinforcements and new heroes. So I reached out to him and asked if I could help in any way, and that's what started me, working on that. Because due to the fact that Frosty is mainly known for the cosmetic mods, which is completely cool, but a lot of people don't know how far the game can reach in its modding potential. So I have been making my changes in the thought of kind of being able to showcase how far modding can be taken with Battlefront 2.
Another reason why I think that cosmetic mods are more popular, more often made, is because they don't require as much in Frosty knowledge to do, because most of the work is done in Photoshop, Blender, Substance, while stuff like effects, UI, gameplay, etc. is done mostly in Frosty, which requires game-specific knowledge.
That's true. That also depends on how the cosmetic modder is thinking of doing the thing. If he generally wants to make it look very realistic, that can take a lot of time.
Yeah.
However, with the mesh import, now that a few months ago, I think it came into Frosty. With mesh import, now people are beginning to spend more and more time on doing cosmetic mods that they want to see. Like one example is the cyborg mall, which was actually kind of more of a revolution, to say so, because people have been asking for a Darth Maul skin for ages, and that mesh importing usually requires some additional work to photoshopping or substance painting. So it really depends from the modder to modder.
Just to expand on that, I'd like to explain kind of what mesh importing is. So prior to, I guess, this year, or maybe a few or so months ago,
it was November, September, I think.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah.
Frosty was only able to change the appearance, or I guess I'll just say colors of the characters. So let's say, you wanted to make the 501st Legion, you could, change the markings. Yes. Or if you wanted to make, the backpack of something blue, you can change the color of it. But you couldn't change the actual, geometry of it. So let's say, you wanted to add Ahsoka to the game. You could change the colors of an outfit that was already in the game to kind of match Ahsoka's, but you couldn't actually add a new shirt or a new design or something like that.
It's like painting a house that's already there rather than building what you want to build.
Exactly. Yeah. So mesh importing allowed people to import or add their own objects or their own designs to the game, and that opened up numerous possibilities, like Cyborg Mall that gave him cyborg legs, and that has opened up a lot of opportunities for modders to really make something new, because they've added Ahsoka, and we're currently working on the Magna Guard. So that was also very groundbreaking.
One thing that I've noticed about about the time when mesh import came in, I noticed that a lot of people, even though they weren't modders before, they didn't do a mod at all. They got interest when they saw that they can actually do their own characters in game, and I saw tons and tons of people coming and watching tutorials on how to model stuff, how to rig models, how to get them into the game. And that's when a lot of new modders came in, if I'm not wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of that really awoke, to say so, an interest among the people, and that is actually is really good for the community.
Yeah, I agree.
On the visual side of things, what's that process like? We got an overview of kind of the power of Frosty with the amazing stuff that you guys are doing on that front. But what's the process like when you say, okay, I want to add Woody to Battlefront, I want to add Minecraft skin Maul?
First, you would want to get like the model rigged, and first you want to make the model, and then second you want to get that rigged to the Battlefront skeleton so it moves with the animations in the game. And second, which usually isn't a problem for like shovelware meme mods because they come with textures if you download them, and like the second step is making the textures or getting those textures, and then having them set for the game format. And then third step's importing them, and sometimes the fourth step is getting rid of meshes that you don't want for the character.
Yes. Well, it mostly depends on what kind of model do you want to get in. Like, let's say only recently, I really started to do my own models from scratch to get them into Battlefront, and it really differs from model to model. Let's say if it's a more of a solid model, like a clone trooper or a stormtrooper, like it has armor, right? It doesn't need cloth physics or more complex animations. Those models are the easiest one to do. For example, if you do only one helmet, it's easier because you just have to rig it to one bone in order for the animation to work properly with the model. However, if you go to the body side of things, then it can get complicated because bones are working with each other in relation. And as no offense, the skeleton from Battlefront 2 it has a lot of bones. It can get very complicated. So yeah, I mean that's the risk we're all assuming. But yes, when you're doing a full mesh from ground up and you're rigging it, you got to make sure that, let's say you got the shoulder, you got a shoulder pad, a piece of armor, but the rest of the body is actually clothing that needs to move completely with the animation. You got to get it right because otherwise it's going to stretch, and it's not going to look natural, and you want to make it look as natural as possible. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect, it's okay, maybe you rig the part, let's say to a bone, but when you get it in game, that part is gonna be stretched to 1 or 2 kilometers long, and that is gonna mess up. That you will know for sure that you messed up something with rigging. That's where tutorials are coming in. I personally, I still don't know to rig models too well. That's why I'm always following tutorials or ask other people. For the only things that I'm good at momentarily, that I know that I'm good at, are texturing and modeling. That's it. But for rigging is always the hardest part of getting a model into the game. And you gotta make sure that the material side, like the textures, the Frosty has a different set of texturing in concept. Like let's say the normal map. Let's take that for an example. The normal map, usually when you use it on Unreal Engine or other modeling programs, then they have more of a purple color to it. But in Frosty, a lot of those textures are inverse, if you know it. They're reverse, and that is also taking a little time when you're exporting the textures from the program you did them in. You gotta compile them in Photoshop, make sure that you get the materials right, and then you also gotta make sure that those materials are actually fitting with the shaders that are on that model. Because I'm gonna take the Clone Trooper for an example, because I had many issues with that. For a certain time, the metallic channel of the normal map that is giving the metallic aspect of the texture wasn't normal. It wasn't something different about it. But when the customization update, when all the clone trooper legions got different gear and stuff, they changed some stuff into weathering, and the blue channel, the metallic texture basically became white. Like if you were going to do a metallic thing there into the texture, it would appear white on your clone trooper. So these textures, these factors also depend on the shaders. It differs also. It differs from model to model, and this is the hardest part about getting meshes and textures into the game. But the rest, usually, it's easy thing. It's an easy thing, like doing the model and getting the texture done.
We have about time for one more main topic. Let's get into kind of like what you guys are hoping for the future of modding. As we go forward into Battlefront not having support, we're as a community we're shifting things. With Wayfinder, we're trying to do a lot more community-focused challenges, events, and some other projects we can't even announce yet because they're still in the works. But as the community grows and develops, what are your hopes for the futures of modding?
I hope for another Frosty update. Because I don't wanna like throw shade or anything, but there hasn't been an update for Frosty in like about half a year, and there are some features that I've seen in that which makes sense for not being released yet, but some of those features look really good, and I really would like to get to use them. And I know the stuff takes time, and I don't want anything rushed. I would just really like for a new Frosty update with the new features to come one day.
For one, I'd love to see in the future the ability to edit maps, to have our own map modifications.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like let's say
goodness.
people I've always took a look at Battlefront 2005. Like people are actually able to get entire maps done, but that's mainly because the modding tools, if I'm not wrong, they were posted by the developers. I cannot remember for sure. But I remember, people have always been asking for planets like, let's say, Coruscant, Umbara. They really want to see those planets in a realistic form. Well, I really hope to see this stuff in the future, like map editing. That, for me, would be the ultimate wish for the future of modding in Battlefront 2.
Yeah, I also agree. I think being able to add your own locations and planets for people to play on would be a huge step. And it is something as a developer that for Frosty, I do want to look into. And I think that would really open up the possibilities for modding, being able to add completely new planets. Another thing that would be, or another feature that would be really nice that would open up opportunities is being able to create custom animations, or like basically, currently if we want to add Ahsoka, she has to, fight with her lightsaber the same way as Anakin. We can't like add her own style to how she runs or how she jumps. So being able to, animate or make these new poses and, how she walks and stuff, being able to change that and add like new ways for her to walk and such, that would also be really useful and would have a lot more potential. So I agree as well.
On a personal note, I think map editing per all would bring many more people together to work together as a team, because map editing would really take some time if you want to do a good map mod, and I think that will also bring many more people together to work more as a team than we are working now. Like arcade improvements, for example, I really love that you guys are working more in a team all together and try to bring more stuff into Battlefront. on an offline level because you can't really do online changes. But arcade improvements, for an example, it's actually what a Battlefront dice update looks like. Like I genuinely felt like I just had a new update to Battlefront 2 when I first loaded up arcade improvements a few days ago.
I remember Mophead said that was essentially his goal, was for like a dice quality update.
I think he's actually achieving it more and more with each update. That's why I congratulate you all.
Yeah, it's really cool being able to see the process of having the artists, work on Ahsoka and being able to share their work with, Mophead and I, where we can actually add it into the game. It's a really cool experience being able to see people working together.
Definitely.
Yeah, like working in a team has been just great, because if I wanted to do something like this myself, like doing this all by yourself would be terrible, because if you're extremely skilled in one place, you may not be as skilled in another place, which is why having a well-rounded team makes this so satisfying and easy, quote unquote.
Easy. It's super awesome to see, and it's not just like even like professionally, you could put this on your portfolio to use when you go job hunting. Like, this is such an awesome thing to have, experience-wise and just generally. Like, it's such a cool thing to add for the community. In theory, is there a way or a possibility in the future, let's just say 5 years down the road, with modding being super robust for this game, is there a possibility that, say, private matches could be modded in?
It's something that people could definitely look into. I think if the right people have an interest in adding private matches, I definitely think it could be done. To my knowledge, there was a group of people, or maybe someone, who actually did add private matches to Battlefront 2015 during the beta, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So I do definitely think it is a possibility. And I am I'm hopeful that is something in the future, because that would open up a lot of possibilities where, instead of just only being able to play offline with bots as Ahsoka, you would actually be able to play as Ahsoka online and, have a heroes versus villain match. That'd be really cool.
Private matches would be also very very good for content creators like Wolf for an example, because he and the 104th has been constantly asking for private matches for recreations in Battlefront 2 of different Clone Wars episodes, and not only Clone Wars, let's say more content, like let's say recreations from other movies, or just filming some things that I don't know, it's just content generally. So please make private matches possible.
That's all for this episode of the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Twitter at Swbpodcast, as well as on Instagram at Swbpodcast. Definitely check us out on there. We keep you up to date on all of the news in Star Wars games and news on the show, as well as future topics and guests we would like to have on. You can find links to the awesome guests that we had on this episode in the description of this episode, either on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. You can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/battlefrontpodcast, like friend of the podcast, Daniel Schilling, or on PayPal, paypal.me/tie-dye-sheep, TYEDYESHEEP. A great free way to support the show is by leaving a review in your favorite podcast app, or with sharing it with your friends. It is greatly appreciated. We've had some great ones left on there recently. We want to thank you so much for those. You can find our YouTube channel on youtube.com/the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. We do streams every Saturday at about 1 p.m. MST. Definitely come check us out. Fun guests, awesome topics, and Q&A. Really have a blast doing that. Definitely give Wayfinder a follow on Twitter. We've got some awesome stuff planned for the future, so keep your eyes peeled. You can listen to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Anywhere you find podcasts, you can find this show. As always, thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.